So I wanted to do something a little bit different today. It's not gameplay, it's not a guide, but we just had a patch for Hades 2, and that patch was focused on balance mostly. At the end of that patch, though, they said that they're hoping to release some new content in an upcoming patch, stuff that's going to be hopefully rounding out the surface. Yeah, maybe some new gods. Maybe we get to see some new weapons. Little unsure of exactly what it's going to be, but as the game moves closer to 1.0, its full release, we're certainly going to be seeing a lot of that stuff come along the way. So I wanted to talk a bit about what I hope comes from that, or, if I was in the driver's seat right now, I'm the lead game designer, what kinds of changes would I make for some of the existing stuff, and also what would I like to add and see in the future. So with that, I want to start with keepsakes. Keepsakes right now, I think, are probably the thing that needs changes the most, and I think they're some of the easiest changes to make to have a huge impact on the game. So my biggest beef with keepsakes right now is that there's not a lot that has a lasting effect over the run. So if we look at the god keepsakes, we have, your Zeus and Poseidon and all that. You can take any of these, pretty much guarantee that you're going to be getting a boon from them, and then start working towards some kind of build, right? And that boon is going to be with you for the duration of the whole run. That's a huge impact. There's only a couple other things outside of that. So we've got like chaos, which is going to stick something to you, some sort of chaos boon, a random one. After you take it off, you'll still actually have that impact. You've got extra money over here. This path of starters, this is going to have some kind of lasting impact, but a lot of stuff, here we go. Crystal figurine, not the greatest. A lot of these things, they have cool ideas, right? The lion's fang, giving you some bonus damage, but eventually this is going to drop down to 0. Black and Fleece. Okay, we've got some Omega moves dealing extra damage, but that's going to drop off. The White Antler. Just a lot of stuff that doesn't really stick. It has like a one-time effect, and then it's gone. And to be able to compete with something that is lasting the whole run, it has a tough job doing it. Now, I'm okay with some of that stuff. Maybe look at the experimental hammer. I actually quite like the metallic droplet. I think these are things you can use to decrease the time that you spend in a region, and then hopefully, that saves you going forward. It's like, we breeze through a region a lot quicker. That's going to help with some high fear runs, and then I can pivot into something safer like the pin. Maybe I want to get a god keepsake after that, or something like that. But for the most part, that's the form that runs tend to take. You want to take something that gives a permanent effect. The higher the fear, the earlier then you're going to want to pivot into a survival keepsake. So on very low fears, maybe that's the very final biome. You want to switch to either the tooth or the pin. But on higher fear runs, you could be doing that as early as region 2, sometimes even the first region. You just want to start with it and hope to survive. But I would love to see some stuff along the way that is that's doing something, a little bit more impactful that sticks instead of stuff like this. I would love to see things that maybe increase your HP or your magic, stuff like that. Each chamber you go into, each location, and that would end up sticking. I'd like to see things like this, if you're going to go with this sort of idea, maybe have a floor to it for Lion Fang, or maybe have some bit that stays afterwards, like maybe the Lion Fang drops down to 10% bonus damage before dissipating, and then when you take it off, it still has that effect. And then it's going to actually compete with some of these things, and it's going to give you pause every time you go into a new region and you're thinking about taking another keepsake. As well, I think there just needs to be more competition for the survivability. Some of these things are trying to compete a little bit with the god boons, and maybe with some tweaks they could get there. But with survivability, it's the pin and it's the tooth. And generally speaking, the pin is going to be run almost every single time over the tooth. So in the last region, and like I said, in higher fear runs, many regions are going to be running the pin. I would like to see things that are trying to compete with that. So even having Skelly's tooth proc before your other death defiances, I think could be very interesting. You could run it sort of in those middle region 2, region 3. If you have no healing, suddenly it acts like a bit of a heal. Now I'm up to 101 health instead of the 60 that I would have, and then I can change into the pin. Or something that refills your life when you enter a guardian chamber, I think could be very interesting. Now I'm capped at 60 health. It's really great to have the pin in the 4th region. It means I can go through each of the rooms. If I die, I can set my life back to 60. But what if I have 250, 300 health? Geez, maybe I could give up a death defiance. I could die getting to the guardian chamber. Then I get to Chronos. My life refills to full. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe not. It's a bit of a trade-off. Something that makes you think about it. And if you had things like that in tandem with some of the other things that I suggested, like, your life is increasing per chamber that you go to. Maybe you're getting, 2 life or something each chamber that you're entering, max HP, then you could actually swap to a boon like that. It's kind of a different strategy. Makes you think more along the way with a lot of the stuff that you take. But just in general, I think there's a lot right here that you could either straight up replace or that you could make some tweaks to, just to have them give a bit more of a lasting effect and have some more competition for those survivability keepsakes right at the end. So some pretty easy changes, but I think they would go a long way in changing up the gameplay. Next, I want to talk about fear. So I love playing at high fear. But there's kind of 2 ways that I see people playing this game. There's the type of thing that I like to do, which is just I want to improve as much as I possibly can. When I played Hades 1, it was like 10 fear, 15 fear, or heat at that time. It was difficult. It took a while before I was okay with, actually having a time limit. Nevertheless, 5 minutes, it seemed impossible when I started. And then, extra health and damage and enemies are going faster. So much to learn, so much to improve on, and it's because it's a single player experience, it's just you versus the game. And it was really, really nice having, this modular system where I could kind of take whatever I'm comfortable with as I get better and better at the game. And then I think the other play style is people who don't care too much about that. Maybe they get the 32 fear statues unlocked or something like that. That's enough for them. Then they just want to play around and have fun. So maybe one time they pick a ton of enemies and encounters, or maybe they want to take a lot of damage, but they'll keep the fear at something that's more manageable. Maybe it's like 16 or 20. They feel pretty comfortable, and they might try some new funky builds. They do like a build that leans into dashes instead of your normal attacks, or maybe it's all omega attacks, or something a little funky, and that's just how they end up having fun with the game. What I see this as a problem right now, even though I think there's a good chance they might add a few things in here, such as something analogous to extreme measures, which would bump it up to around 64 fear, I think. You'd have alternate fights for the bosses. People have already played so much Hades 1 that we're seeing 50 fear clears already. I don't know if 55 has been done. I know it's very, very close if it hasn't been done. I've seen people make it to Chronos at the very least. So there really isn't like that much more room to go for a lot of people. It will be a challenge, but certainly max fear is going to be accomplished, I think, a lot faster than max heat was accomplished in Hades 1, because it was a totally new game, and it was really actually thought to be pretty much impossible, very, very, very unlikely. So what I'd like to see is this increased a bit more, and not to anything too crazy. Let's say it's 80. We'll go with 80 for now. And 80 might be actually impossible, right? It might just be not doable, and I think that's okay. I think you should be okay with the max difficulty just being actually unattainable. And of course, when you say that, people are going to try, and someone will probably prove everyone else wrong by actually doing it. But it gives more of a ceiling for people who really want to push their limits, right? Now, if I could beat 50 and I'm pushing 55, that kind of thing, if you go to 80, it's like, what a jump. Every extra fear as you get near the top. It's a huge, huge stretch. It's crazy. And so if it's basically endless levels of difficulty, it starts to mirror something like a multiplayer game. If you've ever played an RTS or a MOBA, there's just an unlimited skill cap because you're playing against other people. This is a really great way to have that in a single player experience. On the flip side of that, if you're more just kind of having fun or, maybe you're not actually pushing closer to that 80 limit, you get more variance in what you can do. Right now, here's a 44 fear setup. A lot of my runs are around 40. They all look very, very similar. If I do it versus somebody else, I kind of have to pick all the same things, and the game just plays out very much the same. But if you have more variance, even for people who are just at, 15, 20, something like that, now I can really, really lean into, tons more enemies or tons more health, or maybe there's some other cool effects that they can come up with that are just kind of creative and not just sort of damage or health tweaks. That would be great. I think the only issue that you really run into, well, two issues. The one is the time. The more you expand things out, it's harder to constrain things with time. Like, could it be possible to do 80 at 5 minutes if you had all these other effects? Would depend on what they are, but it sounds impossible. It probably would be impossible the way that it shakes out. So maybe you bump up the floor. Maybe the floor isn't 5 minutes, maybe it's 6 minutes now, something like that. You could even go to 7. And runs are still going to be completed pretty quick. I don't really think that breaks the core of the game. And as long as you don't get too carried away, you don't go well beyond 80, it still is going to encourage people to incorporate time into their runs. Because you also don't want it where you could get, 75 fear done or 70 fear done and never even think about turning the time on. Well, then you're kind of just dodging what I think is a mechanic that they really want people to play with. Force themselves to be faster at those levels. But if I'm just playing at 32, I'm playing at 20, well, maybe I don't want time, and I want more options for what I want to play around with. So more options, higher ceiling. I think there's all kinds of benefit to having more fear, even if it was just crept up to 70, something like that. I just don't think they should be scared of something that actually turns out to be not achievable. I think that's actually a totally fine outcome. The Arcana cards. So I actually think the Arcana cards are in a really good spot. I like the little change they've made, shuffling stuff about, the upgrades. I've seen some speculation that maybe they're going to have some sort of flip side. The mirror in Hades 1 had a flip side to all the things in there, but there's a lot more here, and there's a lot more going on because you have to worry about, are things in a column or a row, or for these awakening things, like, do I have certain things of certain values selected? You certainly open up a huge can of worms if you introduce 25 new things, so I wouldn't necessarily expect that, but something that I do think would be very cool, and I think there's room for. I think there's room for a little more complexity in this system. It would be something analogous to the Awakening system, but it's kind of like a flip side to some of these cards. So right now there's 5 cards that have this Awakening effect. Maybe 6 actually. It looks like maybe there's 6. Okay, I'm mistaken. But you can have something like that. About 5-ish cards. That are always on or off. They have this sort of flip side. I'll look at strength as an example. So it's, you have no more than 30% health, you're going to take less damage, deal more damage. It would be cool to see a flip side of this that's kind of the antithesis. So it's like, well, you have more than 70% HP, you're taking more damage and dealing less damage. But then that comes with some benefit. Maybe it gives you more psyche, maybe it's going to give you, I don't know, more magic, more omega damage, or whatever the thing is, right? There's going to be some beneficial effect. And you're forced to take one or the other. So if I deselect this, now I'm actually taking the effect that gives me the negative where I'm at a high level, and if I activate it, here I am taking less. And the idea there is you just have to balance that effect. No matter what, you've always got to kind of consider this is a core effect to the game that we really want you to think about. So something like this, well, this works really great with the pin. If I take this off, maybe I'm not so worried. I'm not really going to be at max health. The engraved pin is going to proc all the time. That's not so much an issue, being 70% or more health. As soon as I drop below that threshold, not a big deal. Same kind of thing goes for magic restoration. Maybe things would cost more magic, or maybe you'd even see a tick down of magic. But is that okay if I'm getting some sort of benefit to it? Maybe I'm spending more magic, but I'm doing more damage with my Omega moves. So as long as I conserve my magic well enough, I'm going to get a benefit from it. Little things like that. I think there'd be room for it. I don't think there's room for too much extra complexity here. But I think, again, if I was in the driver's seat, I'm looking at this, I would at least play with a few of those tweaks, see how it feels, see if that added complexity is too much. Is it too crazy? The final thing I wanted to talk about is weapons. I know there's room for more stuff on the surface and all kinds of other mechanics in the game, but I really just wanted to explore the weapons in this final bit. So in Hades 1, when they added the fourth aspect here, which they did say they're going to be adding, they're going to add a fourth aspect to all of these 5, and there's going to be a 6th weapon. It's all in the patch notes there. When they add that fourth aspect, it tends to have a different move set of some sort. It changes the weapon up completely. I'm anticipating they're going to do something similar. Probably a big reason why they've held off on it for so long. It takes a lot of time to get that right. But I had some cool ideas for, maybe what we would see here. So as far as the staff goes, everything's very witchy. That's kind of the theme of it. And we're shooting stuff out, right? We've got like these big, long spells. And it's neat. I really like the spot that these 3 are in. But I would love to see some kind of, maybe like a monk staff or some sort of martial artist, right? Where it leans into the actual attack. And this kind of special is more of a martial artsy thing. Maybe something where like consecutive attacks are dealing or increasing the speed of your attack. So kind of like Cersei here, where you're hitting and you see that little gauge grow. It'd be cool if that grew, increased your attack speed, and when you didn't hit enemies, then it would drop back down, over like a 2-second period or something. So it's like you're encouraged to always be in melee combat, which is kind of hard. And I also thought it'd be cool, what if the Omega abilities, instead of being these like charged, you hold the thing down, what if it was more combo based? Like if I did an XXY, or right, my normal special, what if something like that, with enough inputs, would actually proc an Omega attack? And then you're really encouraged to just be like, I won't say button mashing, but that's me when I play fighting games anyway, trying to pull off combos, and you're just always in the thick of the fight. I think that could be a lot of fun. For the daggers, good job of being all like sneaky. We can throw daggers, we're dashing behind, we're getting extra backstab damage. Really leans into that sneaky side of things. I'd love to see like a futuristic aspect, something that's like a vibro blade or saber or something like that. Think maybe like Genji from Overwatch, a weapon of that sort of style, where you're dashing between the enemies. So like right now with Artemis, with any of the aspects really, if I hold down the Omega attack, there's this like indicator. Are they close enough? And if they are, I'll dash behind them. I would love it if just the regular attacks had that same sort of indicator, or the indicator would always be on, but the regular attacks would dash me between all the different people on the battlefield, depending on who it's highlighting. Would be a ton of fun on mouse and keyboard. Might be a little bit difficult on a gamepad. But yeah, that way you're moving around very, very fast. Not in behind enemies, but you'd actually be up front, so you'd end up in front of Skelly here. But you'd be rewarded for reading all the inputs, all the chaos, everything like that that's going on the battlefield. Would be really, really difficult to pull off without getting hit a bunch. Being a melee is just always dangerous in Hades. But it'd be fun as hell to be dashing all about. I love things that are just, fast-paced like that. For the flames, there's a couple things I thought of. Something maybe more like flamethrowery with these could be kind of fun. But the other thing that I thought was based on this like Naruto style run, right, where you're leaving this behind you. Now, they did add this. I had this thought before they released the patch that something like this would be kind of cool. But they actually added I think the Hestia legendary now leaves like a trail of fire behind you. And I thought, yeah, like a Diablo 2 fire sorceress using Blaze, if anybody remembers that, where you're leaving a trail of stuff behind you, and then if you were to dash like that, like where that trail is, maybe it leaves a bit of flame behind you. One or the other, or both, really, could be an interesting way to play it. I just like the idea. Right now, there's nothing that plays into like dashes and sprints and that stuff too heavily. I like the idea of one aspect that would really, really capture that. So you just want to be so fast. It doesn't require like a legendary to get off, and then instead you're sort of playing in what I would call the negative space of attacking. So normally somebody's out in front of you, you're throwing stuff away at them. Now it's the enemies behind me I'm concerned with, where I want to kind of, leave this trail of fire or something. I thought that could be kind of neat. With the axe. So the axe, they've got like a fast, spinny axe. Charon, very unique, actually. I think it's just really cool. And then they've got Malinui, which is kind of trying to lean into this like big, hefty swings. I don't know, balance-wise, it still doesn't feel like that good. But I love stuff that is like, big, crushing, slow. I think that can be a lot of fun, too. On the flip side of like these really, really fast aspects. So I was thinking I would love to see something where you're breaking the ground apart. You're causing tremors and earthquakes, and maybe instead of like an Omega attack where I'm spinning, maybe I'm crushing the axe into the ground and breaking out this earthquake or fissure of some kind that's knocking enemies back and stunning them. And I'd like to see it be even slower than this. Just have the slowest damn aspect you can possibly make and still have it viable. It's just big, hefty, like, earth-crushing moves. I think that would be a lot of fun. The skull. So the skull, if you compare this to, let's say, the gun in Hades 1, it's like, yeah, you can shoot, but, that's the speed you're shooting at. It's quite slow. It's almost like a mix between the gun and the shield. Probably comes out a lot closer to the shield. But I would love it, something that has extra skulls by default, more ammo, but maybe they're smaller. But it's a little more stationary. The weapon right now, you're dashing around a lot, right? You're shooting, and then you're dashing to pick stuff up. There's tons of things that benefit that dash. I would love it if it was more of like a stationary, I'm here, but I'm setting up a turret and unloading all my stuff. And then after I've unloaded it all, maybe there's some more unique way than dashing to actually go get it back. But something, it could even just regenerate, honestly, and then you'd have to come up with another special. But something where it's more rapid, and I have to find a spot on the battlefield where I can position myself safely. It would really encourage you to use the cast to hold enemies in place, and then go ahead, set up your turret kind of thing, and fire away. Because, yeah, I don't think there's as much stuff that leans into just the regular cast. There's a lot pushing the Omega cast right now, but that could be a good place for that. And then finally, yeah, they said there's going to be another weapon. The whole thing, tons of speculation. I think everybody's ideas are really cool. I'm probably going to be happy with literally whatever they end up putting out there. But my idea was something that's like a voodoo doll. I think it could work as like a spell book or grimoire, which are some ideas that I've heard. But something that works like a curse, right? So, let's see. Kind of in the same. Well, let's actually go back to this. Kind of in the same way that you have like this big indicator here. Instead of shooting something that's like dealing damage, whether it's all around you, like you can see it's centered around you, or you actually get to aim this thing out. I think it'd be really cool to like drop a curse on a bunch of enemies. So maybe they're going to take more damage, or they're going to deal less damage. They're going to be slower, dazed, like some sort of effect like that. And then you go in and you deal damage to them, try to clean them up. You know, maybe it's sort of like a poisony effect. Could be a lot of different things. And then I think you could make the hammers into different curses. So maybe by default, yeah, they take extra damage or something like that. But if I want to play more defensive, I'm going to take a hammer that is also on top of that going to reduce the damage they take, or it's going to make them move slower or whatever. And I can sort of lean into whatever debuff I really want. You know, maybe it becomes a spreading effect when they touch other people, and now the curse is sort of spread about, things like that. But something where you've got some sort of setup for, hey, there's this negative effect, and then a way to go ahead and actually deal damage with it. I think that would be very cool. It plays into the same thing they're going for with a lot of these weapons, where they want you to use multiple different kinds of attacks. You know, they don't just want you mashing the attack button. They want you weaving in Omega casts and specials and things like that to kind of make things work. So I think something like that would be very cool. Just a handful of ideas. I don't know. I thought it'd be fun just to do something a little bit different. Don't expect any of this feedback to actually make its way to them or anything. But yeah, fun bit of discussion. Would be curious what other people would like to see, their thoughts on sort of the state of the game, where they'd like to see it go. It's fun to speculate while it's still in this early access phase of things. Yeah, just excited to see where things go. So hopefully it was fun. Hopefully it was interesting. But yeah, would love to hear what you guys think.